Well, hi there. This is just a very short upload on the story about the Lochearnhead Hotel and the devastating fire which destroyed the Lochearnhead Hotel back on the 5th day of November 1982. It was in the early hours of Guy Fawkes' night. So it was Friday the morning. It was the Friday morning, the 5th of November 1982. A lorry driver was heading west, and then from St Fillan's you could see the flames in the air, and contacted the emergency services. And the time he got to Lochearnhead, the whole hotel was in absolute devastation. Now, not to be confused, there are two Lochearnhead hotels. After this one had been destroyed, there was a secondary hotel opened up with the same name. But, I mean, being the 5th of November, there's all sorts of kind of suspicion and conspiracy theories. But at the end of the day, it was a fire. There was no guest resident in the hotel at the time. Just 2 weeks earlier, the last guest had departed. Now, Lochearnhead Hotel was built in, the original building dates back to 1746, and it was actually owned by Scottish heavyweight champion and competitor at the Highland Games, Ewan Cameron. Ewan Cameron was a big name in the circuits in the 1950s and 60s especially, and along with the likes of Arthur Rowe and Jay Fawkes and stuff, and Bill Anderson, who came in later. Hamish Davison and Grant Anderson, and I remember lots of the faces, obviously from the 80s and that competing. But certainly back at in the 50s and 60s, Ewan Cameron was a big name. In fact, the British heavyweight championships are still held at Lochearnhead annually in the third week in July at the Highland Games, tossing the cape and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, in regards to the fire, Ewan Cameron was obviously the owner of the establishment, and I'm led to believe that Mrs Thatcher, the Prime Minister of up until the date of the fire, so sometime between 1979 and 1982, she took residence in the Lochearnhead Hotel, and has also been visited and slept in by royalty as well. But so it's got a remarkable history, and it's very sad that such a prominent building, which I do remember, because it backed right onto what's really the junction between where the A84 joins the A85. It's very strange, but the A85 comes from St Fillan's and glides on to the A84, where it becomes totally the A85 all the way to Oban. But the fire was absolutely devastating. What I did just there on Thursday, the 24th of April, I zipped down to Stirling Observer, the newspaper for the area. I mean, Callander had its own newspaper, Killin had its own newspaper, but Callander newspaper ended, I think, way back in 1929. And although there's still some local community news and social media groups, it's not the same. I wanted to read articles, but Stirling Observer have now closed their offices in Stirling, so therefore I had to go to the public library. A very helpful gentleman there, who almost immediately got the information I was looking for, and that was to obtain a news report and a picture, just one picture I wanted of the. I'll put it up for you. One picture of the the devastation after the fire. It was totally destroyed and had to be completely demolished. It was very sad. The only part that remained in the hotel was actually the house which belonged to the Mr. and Mrs. Cameron at the south end of the hotel. That was untouched. But the whole hotel was gone, and it was very, very sad affair altogether. And I think to have lived in Lochearnhead and to have grown up and been used to the not only the rail track and the rail stations and the buses that used to travel through, daily services and stuff up from Crieff to Lochearnhead and stuff, passenger buses. I mean, the whole thing had gone, and even just recently, more recently at least, Owen's shop is now completely closed, so Lochearnhead doesn't even have a shop. It's terrible. But there are several hotels within the village itself, but I mean, losing the school and losing the hotel and losing the train services and all the rest of it, it must have been rather sad for the community on the whole to see such devastation. Something I feel very much is happening in my hometown of Crieff at the moment, but I'll keep that for another video at a later date. So Lochearnhead Hotel, as I say, completely gutted and devastated by the fire. It's a very popular resort, primarily because it was on the routes from Stirling and from Perth on the railway lines, and also because it was close to Lochearn, which in the early 60s began the water sports in earnest. So it's very much one of these very, very old and established buildings which have been lost to the Strathearn community in a whole, because there's so many of these grand buildings have either been burnt or bulldozed down for whatever reason. And we've lost so much of our heritage and culture because of these instances. And I'm not sure if Lochearnhead Hotel could have been saved, rebuilt back to its original state. I'd rather doubt it. I think the fire had really got hold and completely and utterly devastated everything, and there was no chance. What the irony is of the whole thing, though, is I do all this research myself. I don't rely on any other sources. I do when you do research, you've got to find sources. Of course you do. But what I mean is, I found a little snippet of information which surprised me enormously, and it was from the Strathearn Herald, dated the 26th of May 1973. The Strathearn Herald always carried the Saturday dates. They never carried the Thursday or Friday, even though they were published earlier in the week and released to the general public, normally on a Thursday afternoon. But they always carried the date as the Saturday for publication. But anyway, in that is an article in regards to the proprietor, Ewan Cameron, who was a councillor in Lochearnhead, who was demanding the closure of the only fire station, which is next door to his hotel. And his purposes for that, we've claimed that the station master was also joined up as a duplication of work, because he was a local postman, and often he was away down in Balwhidder or Strathire direction, and he was often away for hours at a time. They couldn't account for him, and the remark was something along the lines that they would have to have a fire between these hours, and so it's rather ironic that he fought hard to lose the local fire station, and who's to say if the fire service had still been operational in 1982, would that have helped speeding up the exercise to sort of lessen the damage to the hotel itself. And I mean, the fire plans came from everywhere. They came from Stirling and Perth and Crieff and Cormorey and Killin, but to no avail. And I think it's back in 1992 was when finally there was no provision for any fire services in Lochearnhead whatsoever. So the chances are there was still some, there was still an opportunity for the fire service locally to attend in some shape or form when the fire took hold. But, it's interesting to me, this hotel. I've obviously seen this on my travels many times, and I have wandered in on the front foyer, but I never got a chance to stay in the hotel or have a meal in the hotel, or even a night's drinking in the hotel. Something I really wished had happened. Even sitting in the hotel lobby is one of my hobbies in life. I would have loved to have sat there and gazed out into the world from the wonderful, wonderful hotel foyer. So I found a couple of clips. I've left them in the description box. They're very short indeed, and I managed to get them. Hopefully, because you can't just take someone else's work and stick it in your own. That's not. I wouldn't like that to happen to me. But hopefully they'll be all right about me putting up the links from their YouTubes, the vintage films, and hopefully you can see just at a quick glance what it must have been like. I had to chuckle at the meal that was on offer, and one of them, I think they come from, I think it's from 1961, I think it is. I think one's 1957, the other's 1961, but nevertheless, the food on offer was not very appetizing. It's not something you get away with in this day and age, I don't think. It was rather fatty, the meat, and the presentation in the plate was not something you would get away with in this day and age. No, I'm sure not. But, it was food, and that's all that mattered. But anyway, I shall leave it at that. Is there anything else I've got to say on this matter? I don't think so, but it's just so sad, and I've got a huge collection of vintage postcards. I must have edited this one at one point. It's sitting badly on my frame, but I have a huge collection of vintage postcards which I've collected over many years, and I've always had a keen interest in collectibles. But anyway, they're coming useful tonight, and hopefully that and the vintage fire photograph, which comes from the Stirling Observer, dated 6th of November. No, I beg your pardon, the 10th of November, 1982. Carries a very short story, but because it comes from microfilm, it's not easy to read the article when it was printed off, so to speak, and also the photograph itself is not the greatest quality, who you would expect after 40 odd years as well. But that's that. So hopefully this gives you some information as to Lochearnhead Hotel. The family of the Camerons still live in the neighbourhood, so it's just very sad that all that happened when it did. But I'm sure they must have been absolutely heartbroken that they not only lost a thriving family business, but they lost such a iconic landmark on the shores of Lochearn.